Hi everyone and welcome back to the workshop. Today we are going to look at how to clean and maintain your release aid, in this case a thumb trigger by TruBall, the TruBall Abyss. Okay, so for this job you're going to need obviously your release aid that you want to clean out. Move the camera lens cap. You're going to need some tissue paper, toilet paper, precious in these times I know, but worth it. You're going to need a cloth, a J-cloth, a microfiber cloth, one that's lint free though, one that doesn't leave fluff behind after you've used it, ideally as clean as possible. You're going to need some kind of skewer and your Allen keys. I was about to jump the gun then, but I won't. Some Allen keys. Obviously the size to fit your release aid. You might need some pliers if you're a little bit clumsy with your hands, because there's little springs and stuff inside obviously to fit back in. And most of all you are going to need a clear plastic bag, because the contents of this release aid are obviously under tension, and sometimes when you take the case off the springs can pop out and you don't want to lose them. So if you make sure that you do the disassembly inside a clear plastic bag, thus you won't lose anything important. So what I've just done with the tissue paper and the skewer is that I've ripped off a little bit of it and wound it around the top end of a skewer, taped it on to make a little cleaning swab. Obviously if you've got cotton buds or the equivalent thereof, you could use those, but I don't like throwing away plastic for no good reason. And I've got tape and I've got toilet paper and I've got skewers, so I've just made myself a little pseudo cotton bud instead. Okay, now we've got this, we can take the release aid apart and get on with the cleaning. I'm going to start the disassembly outside of the plastic bag because I know what the inside of this release aid is like. I've disassembled and reassembled these several times, so I'm confident that I'm not going to lose anything. So I'm going to take out the first screws so that you can see what I'm doing, and then I'll do the final ones that hold the case inside the bag so that we don't lose any of the contents of the release aid. So we're going to start with these small set screws around the top. These ones, of which there are many, and they're very long, so just be careful when you take them out that you're not cross-threading anything. Hope this is in focus. So as you can see, that's what I mean by all that focus. Yeah, that's what I mean by how small the screws are. They are really tiny, so you've got to be very careful when you're taking them in and out. That's the first one. Let's get on with the rest. That's what I meant about bits dropping out. You always got to be aware of what you're doing. Don't lose anything on the floor, because in most workshops and probably in most archery clubs, or even just in your house, you'll probably never find these little bits again. Okay, there's one more screw holding in the actual hook itself, the sear mechanism itself, and then there's one more holding just a cover plate, so 2 to go. I'm really hoping this is actually in focus and you can see what I'm doing. If not, use your imagination. So there we go, that's the sear mechanism off. Knit. Dinky little sear mechanism. And then we've just got this cover plate left. I'm sorry if you can hear a lot of bird noise outside. The birds are very noisy around here at the moment, but also the parrot is in his cage outside and he's making himself known, so apologies for any background noise. That's the last screw, that's the last cover plate. Okay, so that's the focus. There we go. That's the first part of the disassembly done. We've now got these 3 screws here, so See if we can focus in. 1, 2, 3 to take out. I'm going to do 2 of them, and then I'm going to do the third one inside the plastic bag for safety's sake, so we don't lose any of the springs inside. The screws, these case screws, rather than the adjustment screws through the sear head, are smaller even. So, I don't know if you can see that. There you go. So make sure you keep those separate and don't attempt to use them in the place of the first screws that we took out, because they do not match, they're not the same. There's the second. So we've just got this third one left in the corner of the case now. We're going to do that inside the plastic bag. Number 3 out. Just going to carefully show you now. As you can see, the top of the case is just lifted up. You see that crack in there? So that shows you what's going to come off. This top plate is going to come off. We're going to do that back inside the bag. Okay, there's the top plate with its mechanism attached. So this ring lever. It's quite a ingenious little mechanism actually, this Abyss. So it's quite interesting to see the inside. This, let me get something I can point with. Hopefully this is in focus. This little red screw and spacer is obviously the trigger stiffness adjustment and travel adjustment. So make sure you don't lose it. There's not necessarily as much need to take that out, but we're going to clean it anyway, just because we've got the release aid part. So be careful, because that's very small. And then this has got, yeah, this just fits on pegs around this ring, so we've got no springs to lose in this part apart from the red one. So that's the first bit to clean. And then the second bit will be the other half of the case. You can see why we did it in the plastic bag, because this spring here is the one, hopefully you can see, yeah, this spring here is the one under most tension in the case, and it's the one that you're most likely to lose if you just gung-ho rip the top off. So we're just going to catch that on our skewer now so that we don't lose it, and we know that it goes back in this little space here. Okay, so first things first, let's clean the main part of the case. This isn't a particularly old Abyss, but you can still see that we've had some metal dust build up inside here. Bit around here, bit around here, bit in here. That's pretty normal. I mean, you're going to get that with any release aid. In some cases, if you don't take care of particularly brass release aids, if you have them in the damp, you can get a bit more corrosion even. I don't know why, but they do tend to have a little bit more crud inside them. So we're going to clean this whole ring out where the ring lever goes, and then we're going to clean the other half. So grab your little cotton bud, whatever you happen to be using, and just work your way into all the little crevices and clean out the dirt. And you can see, hopefully, see the amount of muck on that? That's going to have an effect on the function of the release aid. This is why you must maintain your release aids, and why you must keep them clean inside, particularly if you've had them out shooting in the rain a lot. There's no need to put any lubricant or cleaner inside this case when you do this work. You just need to have something textile that can wipe the dirt away. You don't want to be adding anything that's gungy and can attract the dirt to it in the future, because that will act like an abrasive paste and wear the release aid away even more. Just going to switch to the pointy end of the skewer to get into the little tiny bits where the swab won't go. Once we've got them loose, we can go back in with a swab and collect them. Okay, I'm just going to finish off with a little bit of paper, tissue paper that is, without the stick in it, so I can get really tight into the smaller areas. Make sure they're all clean. Okay, there we go, that's the inside of the main case all cleaned up nicely. So we can put that to one side, and then we can do the smaller half with the actual ring mechanism in it. So I'm very carefully going to lift up, you can see this, the ring itself, the lever. It's on pegs that fit it into the case. There we go. So that's what that looks like. And as you can see, that's liberated the little tension spring that we were looking at earlier. So I'm just going to make sure we don't lose that. I'm going to keep my thumb on it as I take the other peg off. There we go. There we go. So that's the spring and spacer. Get the camera to focus. That I said emphatically do not lose. We'll put that in the plastic bag so we know we can't lose it. And here's the thumb peg itself that's come off. Okay, so I'm just going to make up another little swab, and then we'll clean these and fast forward through this bit, I think. Swab number 2, off we go. Definitely dirty. Now onto the ring. All cleaned up. Then finally, just the pin end of the trigger mechanism. Of the thumb peg. This isn't actually a mechanism. Just another word to the wise, the pins are loose in this assembly, so do not lose the pin. Be aware that it is loose, and if you're worried about losing it, take it out. Okay, I'm just checking to see that the springs are clean as well, because obviously if they get gummed up with dirt, their function is impaired also, but these look pretty good, so I'm not going to worry about cleaning these. I'm going to carefully lay them with the other parts so I can check that I've got everything laid out correctly. Right, and now the simple part. Not really, the reassembly. If you've never done your release aid before and you don't know, you're not familiar with its construction, so you're not sure about how it goes back together, take photographs at every step of the way so that you can refer back to your photograph to see how it all goes. If you are mechanically minded, it's actually fairly straightforward. My primary message is don't be afraid of doing this, because everything came out, so everything will go back in as well. See, I had it the wrong way up first, but it was obvious that it wasn't going to go on that way, and it goes on in fact this way, so just slot it back on. Nothing to be afraid of, it's a simple mechanism, you can work it out. So the larger of the two springs that we took out goes in this gap here. Now obviously once I push that spring in, I need to be careful that I don't lose it, so I'm going to have to keep my thumb over it. I'm going to do the rest of my talking now so that I can concentrate when I do that. This little travel spring needs to go back into the trigger assembly. I keep calling it a trigger assembly, sorry it's not, the thumb peg assembly, obviously before you put the thumb peg assembly back on. In actual fact, let's do that first because that's more straightforward. Sorry, brain fart there, trying to fit it the wrong way up. Okay, so if I just hold the peg in, that's the trigger in its correct place. Okay. This way you can see it. Now we're going to lay on the ring. This is the bit that this little nub in here is the bit that you press to prime the release aid, so you know that that has got to stick out the back of the case, so you can line that up quite easily. That just goes on there like that. Now let's put the small spring in. I'm afraid you won't be able to see this bit so well, but trust me, it goes back in. You can use your pliers to manipulate the spring, or you can use the end of your skewer. Okay, so that's back in. Now it's under tension. I'm doing this outside of the plastic bag so you guys can have a better sense of what I'm doing, but I would strongly recommend that you do this reassembly inside the plastic bag so you don't lose anything. So next thing to go in is the larger of the two springs. That goes in this, let me carefully lift this up, that goes in this gap here, so between here and here. This will be under a lot of tension as soon as I get this spring in, so I've got to keep my hand over it and you won't be able to see whilst I get the cover over the top. I'm going to get the cover in the correct orientation ready so that I don't need to hang around as I do that, because I really don't want to lose this spring in my quite dirty workshop. Okay, so that's the spring in. And that's the cover on and seated correctly. Okay, keep a finger on it until you started to get the screws in, because you obviously don't want to have the cover spring off and disappear into the distance. So what I need next are these small screws, the shortest ones, the case screws. We're going to put the top corner one, so sorry, this one back in first. Okay, so we don't need to be as worried about it coming apart now because we've got one of the case screws back in, so we can hold it more gently. Now let's put the other case screws back in, and then we'll get it onto the seam mechanism itself. Don't make these screws too tight because you'll rip the thread from the metal case. So you just need to nip it tight, not really wrench it. Okay, now we need to get the seam mechanism to sit correctly in this cog, basically. We need to make sure that we put it back at the correct setting where we had it before. what I was doing there was I just checking that the springs and the feeling of the sear mechanism itself was okay, because if it is, then there's no point taking that unit apart to clean. It's actually very tightly sealed compared to the main case, so it doesn't need to be cleaned as often. So I would suggest you leave that alone unless absolutely necessary. Again, the assembly inside is pretty straightforward. It's just held by the one locking screw here. Can you see that? Yep, there. But don't touch it unless you really need to, unless the release aid feels really gravelly despite you having cleaned the main body. Okay, so that's the first one placed where it needs to go. You have to be really careful with these screws. I've said it so many times, but I really need to emphasize it. They're so thin and they're so easy, they're so finely threaded that it's very easy to get them cross-threaded. Just go slowly and make sure that you're holding the sear mechanism in the correct place so that the holes line up, and that if you can feel too much tension on the Allen key as you're tightening it in, then you know that you've got it in the wrong place and you need to do a visual check the holes are lined up. So this is going in easy, so I know it's in the right place. Okay, before I do the rest now, I'm just going to put that little cover plate in, this tiny little cover plate in the gap at the top here. The cover plate actually has a correct way around to go, so make sure you check visually which side the smaller gap between the screw hole and the sear is on, and that's the way you need to line up the cover plate. If that doesn't make sense to you, it will make more sense if you're trying to reassemble an Abyss. When you see it, it makes a lot more sense. Or rather, when you do it yourself. Congratulations if you have watched this far, by the way. I'm assuming that's only a very few of you, but we'll finish nonetheless. Okay, so that's all the way in, just nip tight. Now we'll do the second screw that goes into the sear mechanism. Again, start it with your fingers so you can feel that you've got the thread correct before you go onto the Allen key, the hex key. There we go, just nip tight. And then again, this final cover has a correct way to go, so check that the screw holes line up before you start. I'm just going to put both of these in finger tight first, and then I'll go onto the Allen key, just in the interests of efficiency. Then just do a final check on the tightness. They need to be just nip tight, no more than that. There we go. Okay, and that's the full thing reassembled. Now, better check it works. So, there we go. Yep, mechanism's all correct, all feels right. And it feels a lot less gravelly than it did. You can tell in the sound of the mechanism, it sounds crisp. That means it's clean, that means it's functioning properly. Lovely. Okay, I hope that all made sense. Just a couple of words of warning and advice before you embark on this yourself. Make sure you're not invalidating your manufacturer's warranty by doing your own release aid maintenance. You shouldn't be, but it's worth checking just in case. Make sure that you are comfortable with how the thing is assembled and how it goes back together before you start taking it apart. If that means you need to do some research on the internet, or asking other people, or indeed watching more videos like this, then please do go ahead, because better safe than sorry. That said, as you saw, the mechanism inside is fairly straightforward. You can work out how it works if you are reasonably competent in a workshop. Even if you're not reasonably competent in a workshop, in fact. So give it a go. Don't be afraid to do your own maintenance on stuff like this, because the more you learn about your kit, the better you can maintain it, the better you can shoot. Do drop me a line in the comments below if you've got any questions. Hopefully I can answer them. But otherwise, good shooting. See you again soon.